Welcome to another installment of the Whittier Warriors Youth Training video series. This one's going to be a little bit different than what we've done in the past. You've seen us do myrtles and lunges, and there'll be plenty of other drills and exercises that we'll add to the video series. But I wanted to add one, honestly, partly out of necessity in order to train our coaching staff on an ongoing basis, as well as to share information with parents in terms of how we train. We try to run a very transparent program. There really is no secrets. I am not a believer in top secret training methods. I think it's something that should be open and clear to the entire running community. There's nothing that we do that's very different from what other people do. I think our mentality, our approach, our sense of unity is what sets us apart. But truly our methods are something that are very scientifically based. We'd like to illustrate that with this video, make sure that our coaching staff, our parents are very in tune with what we're doing. And if anybody else would love to use some of this, we'd be honored for you to do so. If you don't like it, that's okay too. But we'll go ahead and put out this information. So with that, let me share out my screen and let's begin. All right, so welcome to an introduction to coaching youth distance runners. This is both for distance track as well as youth cross country. This is obviously part of the Whittier Warriors Youth Running Program. We're going to go over some very important topics. And as I mentioned before, this is to be very useful for coaches, assistant coaches, even parents that want to be involved a little bit at a higher level in terms of the actual training, both from a physical perspective as well as a mental perspective. And we'll get into those details in a bit. In terms of what will be covered, we'll be looking at the energy usage, the systems to train, hydration and dehydration, recovery, which is incredibly important, nutritional needs, periodization, tapering, strength and flexibility and drills, race strategy, which is obviously very important, and last but definitely not least is mental strength and a little bit of kind of the psychology behind some of our coaching. I will say right off the bat, there's no way that in the 30-40 minutes that it'll take to cover this, that we can cover these with any real depth. These are meant to be covered at a high level. Any one of these can be turned into an hour at least webinar on this, and we will do those in the future. But we wanted to at least hit them at the high level. It's really an introduction, a 101 course, for lack of better terms. So if you have any additional interest or feel comment, feel free to reach out to us. And we will kind of continue the series and add more details as we go. But these are some of the topics that we find very important and necessary, at least for a foundational basis. Right, with that said, the 6 systems to train, and right off the bat, we'll get into something that some coaches may disagree with me. I do believe there's 6 systems, depending on who you talk to. They'll talk about 4, they'll talk about 5. I've seen others talk about 6 as well, but I'm a very big believer on there's 6 systems to train for a distance runner. First one being endurance, which is the logical conclusion, right? Endurance, distance, they go together. We try to build this as simple as doing long runs, consistent mileage, building mileage up to max mileage in the summertime, for example. All very important, right? And we'll get into some more details of that. But, this is kind of your basic easy pace, long run pace for your runs that you do. Probably one of the easiest systems to train, but you also put in a ton of time into this system, right? Meaning you're running 5 days out of your 6-day training cycle during the week. We're focused on that. A high percentage of time is focused on that. And in fact, before I get into more details on each of these, take a look at the graph that we're looking at here. You'll see endurance is kind of lower than aerobic threshold and VO2 max. And now that does not mean that you spend less time on endurance and more time on aerobic threshold, or what a lot of people call tempo runs, or more time on VO2 max, your 800 repeats, that type of stuff, than you do your endurance. You're definitely putting in more mileage and more time on the endurance side on your easy and long run paces. And we'll talk a little bit more kind of that breakdown. But what it does mean that in terms of what it takes to be a strong 3-mile runner, a strong 5K runner, a strong 2-miler, which is really the range that we're aiming for here. This is kind of the breakdown in terms of what is really needed. So as you can see, if I had to really put dime for a dollar in terms of importance, aerobic threshold or tempo runs are critical to success in that. So this is more of in terms of a criticality importance, not necessarily the equal amount of time that you put into that, right? So you're still going to spend more time doing your easy long run paces than you are tempos. So I just want to make sure that's clear. But again, you can see, between endurance, aerobic threshold, and VO2 max, those are the big ones. You start going down power. Power has to do with that ability, not only to go up and down hills, right, but also the ability to really translate that into pure raw speed. And later we'll talk about how we do that, especially in the tapering phase. And then from power, we get down to speed, endurance, and pure speed. If we really focused a lot on those systems, like an 800-meter runner would, or even a 400-meter in particular, that's a little different, right? Not to say the distance runner doesn't need those, but we don't spend a ton of time on those. We kind of leave that a little bit towards the end of the season. We do throw it in across the entire season, though. That's important to remember that as well. But we don't spend a lot of time in it. We don't put a ton of effort, and we don't need it necessarily. So runners that are a little bit weak on that side can still perform significantly well overall in a 3-mile race or a 5K. But again, you still need them. They're still important, and we will talk about them. Going back to here again, endurance, very clear, slow, easy pace. Talk test is probably the best way to measure this, right? If you're able to run, or your athletes are able to run at a consistent pace for a long period of time, meaning theoretically up to about 90 minutes, right? Younger athletes, like the ones that we coach and Whittier Youth Warriors, it's going to be less than that. We're talking more about 40 minutes, 50 minutes, but really you want to build up to 90 minutes, even a little bit more. You should be able to do that, and do that while conversing with the partner next to you, right? And not in long, paragraphs at a time, but in short phrases without an extraordinary amount of effort. If you're gasping for air, you're probably going too far, too fast in particular. They should be consistent as possible, meaning you don't want to be stopping constantly. These should be done for the most part, and again, we won't get into a lot of the exceptions, but for the most part on a fairly flat, where the terrain is similar across the board. You're really kind of holding a certain level of effort and you're maintaining it there. That's going to be important. You have one long run a week, right, for kind of that microcycle, and then you're going to have consistent, easy pace runs throughout the week, both for the purpose of recovery, which we will talk about later, and also just for your daily maintenance of your aerobic system. All right, aerobic threshold, let's talk about that. These are your tempo runs, as many people call them. These are runs in which they're done once every 2 weeks, one every 3 weeks. It really depends on your athletes, the age, a lot of details that we can't get into here right now, but we will in the future. But just know these have to be a part, and it's an early part of where you start throwing these in. So we'll get into a little bit more when we talk about periodization, but there's this kind of older myth of having to wait significant amount of time after the summer to start throwing in speed workouts. Aerobic threshold runs should be thrown in, again, every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks at least, from early on, even during your base building period. These are done anywhere from about 20 minutes to 30 minutes, even up to 35 minutes of consistent running at a hard pace. Now, this is not race pace, but this is a significantly strong pace. And the idea is that this is right at the threshold of where your body shifts from being able to consume enough oxygen to burn during that pace and just about to go anaerobic. Meaning, when you're out there racing a mile or racing 800, you're completely going anaerobic most of the time. You won't be doing that for the most part during a 5K, or definitely not anything longer than that. But this run will teach your body how to push that threshold higher, right? So you want to hold up there. So aerobic threshold runs, again, once every couple of weeks. They should be, for most of your athletes, depending on age and ability, we're talking, at least, 2.5 to 3 miles, up to 5, 6, maybe even 7 miles of consistent level effort. These should not necessarily be on hilly courses. These should be relatively flat. They should be in areas where you can measure either through Garmin's or, kind of these longer cycles where you're able to see exactly how they're doing through the mile, through the 2 mile, through the 3 mile. Your athletes are very clear at the pace they're hitting, and if they're hitting the correct pace. Running these too fast will simply exhaust the runners. They won't be able to recover in time for other workouts throughout the week. Running these too slow really boils down to kind of a wasted effort. So they have to be done right. And it's easy enough to look anywhere on the internet in terms of finding the right pace based on their ability, right? So based on the latest 3 mile or 5K races they've had in the past. But again, pace is extremely important and hard to do. I will warn you, getting your athletes to run these correctly are very difficult. Look into something called cruise intervals to start with if you're having trouble maintaining that pace. These are kind of longer intervals, meaning 1.5 miles, 1.75 miles, broken up into 2 or 3 pieces as opposed to one long tempo run. All right, VO2 max. VO2 max, these are just probably the most common workouts. A lot of teams do 800-meter repeats, 1Ks, which is, your 1,000-meter repeats. These are anywhere from 4 to 6 to 8 repeats of each. Relatively short recoveries, so we're looking at about equal time. So if you're taking 2 minutes and 30 seconds, then you take 2 minutes and 30 seconds on the recovery in between. Should be an active recovery always. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're having to run around the track, but they absolutely should continue to be moving, even if it's very slow. Get them back to the line quickly. You recover too long, it's not going to benefit them. You recover too short, they won't be able to hit their times. So again, recovery should be equal time to the effort. So if your athletes are taking 4 minutes to accomplish that 1K, then take 4 minutes in between. If you're taking 5 minutes, et cetera. It's going to vary a lot, obviously, by age and ability, but make sure that the rate is about that. Of course, you can get more challenging throughout the season, start lowering that recovery time, but don't lower it to the point where they're not able to hit those times. It really is counterproductive. Power. Right, this is where we have some discrepancies or differences with coaches. I see power as a separate system for 2 reasons, right? So power really is building strength and true power in your legs. Cross-country running in particular is on very hilly courses. For those of you locally, you know about Mount Sac, even the Clovis State course and Clovis Invitational course. A lot of these courses require a lot of power and a lot of strength to run, especially the uphill portions of the course. Not to mention the power in itself, even if you're running on flats, even if you're running distance track, will eventually translate to more speed. If you look at a sprinter of any type, 100, 200 meter sprinters, tons and tons of power compared to a distance runner. That doesn't mean that we don't need power. Less than a sprinter will need it, but we absolutely do. We build that a little bit differently, right? A sprinter will spend a ton of time in the weight room. Weight room is absolutely a part of what a distance runner needs as well. We won't get too much into that here, but there is another alternative for us to build a lot of power and strength, and we do that through hill running. So a lot of significant amount of time is spent running hills. Big believer in that. Some people will shy away from hills, saying it's kind of a little bit too much stress on the body. They're not able to recover. There's a lot of benefits to running here. Power being one of them. 2, running uphill tends to push you into an aerobic threshold kind of level for most hills, especially the longer, prolonged, kind of steady climbs. There's an additional benefit of working those systems there as well. So again, power, a different system, a different part of our periodization of when we insert that into the system. These could be as simple as hill repeats. Not a big fan of the shorter 100-meter hill repeats. We tend to do 200, 300, 400-meter hill repeats. Again, more sustained, strong effort. These are meant to be run strong. They're relatively short compared to others, but they will build power in the runner. And I'll be honest, they build confidence in the ability to run hills. Many, many, many runners are deathly afraid of hills, right? Both up and down hills for different reasons. Get them comfortable running hills. There's a physical benefit, but there's absolutely a mental benefit as well. All right, 5th system, speed endurance. This one's probably common. 400-meter runners are probably your idealistic speed endurance runner, right? Not only do they have to be fast, but they've got to have the ability to hold that speed. In fact, if you see the finish of any 400-meter run, whether it's youth running it or whether it's the Olympic final in the 400 meters, you're going to see the same thing happen in every single one. The people winning the race and passing runners at the end are not the runners that are speeding up. It is the runners that are slowing down the least, right? This is where everything you can imagine starts to burn in your legs and in your lungs, and you're holding on to maintain that speed. Those that can hold on the best are able to win the races. Those that don't fade very, very quickly. Fast forward now to a distance runner, right? We're not running just 400-meter races, but guess what? Guess what we are doing for about 400 meters in every single distance race? We are kicking, and we are kicking hard. So we really do duplicate, a very common scenario for a 400-meter runner every single time we race, but we're having to do it after having run, 2 3/4 miles, after having run 1/4 mile, and then having to really produce some amazing speed and be able to sustain that speed all the way to the end of the race. If we can get a ton of details here, especially talking about the different types of runners, right? Kickers will wait to the last 200 to 300 meters and try to pass people. Those that maybe don't have incredible, pure raw speed, they're going to rely on that speed endurance, right? To start the kick at even 500, 600 meters out and sustain that, leaving the kickers farther and farther behind, or at the very least, burning that kick out so they have nothing left when they can challenge them on the last 100 meters. So it's something important. Now, how do you do that? You're running intervals, repeats, short recovery in between, but you do begin to extend that as the season goes out because you want to focus on that ability to hold that speed and get faster speed like we do on the pure speed side. You're talking repeats that are 600 meters in length, 500 meters in length, 400 meters in length, and you really want to see runners be able to sustain that speed, right? You want to make sure that they run very evenly so they don't go out kicking super hard and then just dying at the end. You don't want to see them jogging as if they were doing an 800-meter repeat, VO2 type max workout, and then kicking the last 100 meters, right? It needs to be consistent across the board. They really need to kind of reach a fully anaerobic effort, remember, a without oxygen effort for this, sustained period of that interval, of that repetition, right? So a little tricky to do there, but most kids catch on pretty quickly. If anything, you may have to back some of the kids off as they go a little too quickly at the start. But again, pretty close to 100% effort. Give them a time to recovery. You'll have to adjust. At the beginning, they'll have a hard time without some decent recovery. Later, they might be able to be shortened. And if you see they're having trouble, increase it because the importance is that sustained effort, right? Last but not least is pure speed. This is pure, raw, unadulterated speed. Some kids will have this very naturally. Kids that have played sports like soccer will have it, something that they built into their training. But you want to make sure and build this. Don't disregard it just because you're training distance runners. Simple things like a kick at the end of the race, positioning at the beginning of the race, the ability to surge is all going to come from the raw speed. Not to mention a runner that is properly trained in pure speed tends to have better form, and I say tends because it's not always the case. Tends to be a more efficient runner, which is incredibly important. Efficiency for distance runners is key. So, good form, good power, good mechanics in running is important. Now, again, this can be done through a series of drills, but the actual workouts for pure speed are short, and we're talking 60-meter repetitions, 100-meter repetitions, max 200 meters. This is focused on very strong, powerful, and not just with the lower body. Make sure they're putting their upper body, head positioning, arms, all driving, into some very excellent amounts of speed. For some kids, it's going to come very natural. Others will struggle with this. You'll see some kids, it looks like they're running the same way they run the entire 3-mile race. You'll feel like they're not kicking, they're not trying. It's not necessarily that. It's that they haven't found that gear. And by find, I don't necessarily mean physically. Yes, that is part of it, but mentally, they're not sure what that feels like, right? You've got to remember, if you've had them out there doing base for 3-4 months in a row and they're freshmen or something, or younger kids running for the first time, they're not sure what that feels like, right? So remind them, do a lot of strides, do a lot of sprinting, even in games for some of the younger kids, right? Make sure they understand that gear and where it is and how to find it. All right. So anyway, long-winded, as I can say, each one of these can be turned into an hour webinar on its own, but just understand that you have to focus on all 6 of these systems. We'll talk later about when, right? But for now, I just know that these are the 6 systems in play. All right, periodization. So we said we're going to talk about this. That really defines the when, right? The what was those 6 systems. The when defines when you put these in. And a lot of it has to do with the ability to stress a human body out, make sure that it recovers from that stress. And in doing so, when it recovers, it will adapt and be stronger. So you see that in this chart here, right? Starting abilities, kind of our dotted line at the bottom there. You stress the body, whether it be through a long run, whether it be through an interval workout, any of the things that we talked about, right? And as a result, the body is actually more tired. Believe it or not, the runner is slower. That's perfectly okay. It's a strange world we live in, right? But we actually, in what we're doing to train our athletes, we're making them slower. As we do that, as the body recovers, if we give it the correct amount of recovery, and we'll talk later about what that means, right? Before the body is stressed again, it will recover. The body will adapt. Pretty much think of it as your body saying, wait a minute, what was that? That workout was hard and that hurt. I need to adjust my muscle, my blood flow, cellular level changes happen in the body to make sure that the next time you put it through it, hey, that's not as bad. We're more prepared for that. And in doing so, everything becomes more prepared, right? And there now it rises, you can see, to that second dotted line for the new ability. And then again, you stress it again in another hard workout. It lowers the ability, you allow it to recover, adapts again, and you get up to the third dotted line, which is the new ability. Incredibly important. So again, in terms of the overall plans that you're going to create, and we're not going to get into a lot of that detail, we'll do that in a separate video, but just know that any coaching plan, any training plan that you develop for your athletes is going to involve both the stress, which is a lot of the workouts that you'll put in there, but it needs to involve recovery. You don't necessarily, well, I shouldn't say, I was about to say you don't put it in your training plan, but I say you should. You should make it an effort to put in there. You should plan out, even if you don't actually type it into the screen, but there should be plans on recovery. And recovery comes in different ways. We don't speak of it as just, hey, get a good night's sleep and a good meal and be ready to work out the next day. It comes on a daily basis, something like that, sleep, nutrition, hydration. It comes in terms of, a good cool down after an intense workout, good stretching, things like Myrtles, making sure your body can recover quicker. Depending on how you talk to, there's different, nutritional items that will help with that, some superfoods, not to mention, things like massages, rolling out, all these things will help you recover, increase blood flow, ice baths. I'm not a huge fan of that. We won't get into that right now, but it is an option, right, you can use as well. But long story short, recovery is important on a daily basis. On a weekly basis, right, you need to have some recovery time. Now, again, age, ability makes a huge difference. Whether it's 1 day off a week, whether it's 2-3 days off a week, whether it's simply a lighter run on that 7th day and you're still running every day, but there needs to be recovery. There needs to be hard workouts and then easier days where the workouts are not as hard. All that adds to recovery, which allows the body to adapt and allows you to reach that new ability. All right, so the body changes with stress. And we talked about that, right? If there is no stressor, if there is no hard interval workout, if there is no long runs, no increase in mileage, the body doesn't have to adapt. There's no reason. It can handle it. So you're not going to get more fit, and your athletes won't be more fit, and they won't be able to perform better. So just know that stress, absolutely, like recovery, are part of your plan. We talked about cycles, weekly, monthly even, right? So when we get into the monthly ones, we get into like kind of these larger macro cycles where you're going to want to go maybe hard week, and then an easier week, and that's recovery as well. So it's not just daily, it's not just weekly recovery, it's also kind of these larger cycles where you're also recovering, and even seasonally. Most of you, are well aware, we tend to do this all the time with our athletes, and most programs do. At the end of the season, we shut down for a couple of weeks, right? Some a little bit more, some a little less, but there's a period of time where the athletes don't run at all, and that is for the purpose of recovery, both physical, and keep in mind, when we're talking seasonal recovery time, yeah, there's a benefit on the physical side, but I honestly feel that the strongest point of recovery is on a seasonal level is the mental recovery. Athletes, especially youth athletes, need a break from us coaches. They have had enough of us as much as they respect us. They need some time off. They need to be kids. They need to go and play some video games, hang out with their friends, not worry about what they eat or drink, not worry about all these things we're talking about. Just relax for a bit and then come back. They'll come back hungrier, they'll come back stronger. If you try to run them straight through the off season, some are super strong, amazing kids out there, and they'll last a while, but they will fall apart on you when it really counts the next season's postseason. So make sure you give them some time off. Recovery, again, important in a lot of areas. Competition helps. So keep in mind that there's only so much we can do when it comes to duplicating race situations or simulating races, right? And we do that quite well, right? We work different systems and at different times and different parts of the week, or one week we do hill repeats, another one a tempo run, another one an interval workout. But at the end of the day, there's nothing like replicating or simulating a race more so than the race itself, right? Race your kids, coaches. Believe it or not, even in the summer, I know there's a lot of discussion about yeah, coach, you're over racing them, you're going to burn them out. Mental burnout is absolutely a thing, and absolutely you can burn them out if you stress them out. So race them for fun, get them out there doing team time trials, break them up into 2 teams for fun, get them racing. They will both learn mentally from a strategic standpoint in terms of how to race. They will make mistakes early on. Hey, that's where I want them to make them, right? In those summertime trials that at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. You need them to do, not to mention that it stresses the body exactly in the way that you need them to stress them for a race, because it is a race, right? Make sure they don't cruise it. they don't tempo a race. And I know some coaches are going to be highly disagreeable with me when it comes to that. I think that's a wasted effort. Why bother? Don't race if you're going to go on tempo a race. I don't care how good of an athlete you have. If you're going to race and learn from that race. So I think, can you over race athletes? Yes. But should we race them more? Yeah. And can they handle it? Absolutely. Kids are amazing. They can do great things. Now, are you going to have acceptance to that and have to adapt? Sure, go ahead and do that. There's kids that you're going to see, hey, this isn't working out. Make it adapt. And this goes for everything, right? There's no such thing as one plan rules them all. You're going to have to make adaptations for individual runners. That's the way it works, coaches. And if we're, no offense, but if we're being lazy and we just say, oh, this plan works for everybody and I'm not adjusting because it's too much work, then, well, yeah, that's your choice. But we have to do that. There's different athletes that have different needs. All right, let's keep going with this. Recovery, we've talked about it a lot, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time here. But again, if you look at the diagram, it's training, it's the damage that hurts the muscles, and please don't get freaked out by damaged parents, especially if you're watching this. It's normal, right? Muscles get damaged when we do exercise, anything physical, right? That's a normal thing at the cellular level. The muscles recover and recover stronger, and then you see that improvement. And this is true of not just running, of anything really. So again, stress is stress, workout and life stress. Believe it or not, life stress has a lot to do with this. Getting them mentally stronger is important to get these kids and athletes prepared. And part of doing those stronger, harder workouts like the intervals, tempo runs, and long runs is not only for the workout itself, but it's the ability to handle that stress. Because when come race time, they're definitely going to be a little more nervous and they'll be better prepared for it if they've already kind of been through it. We talked about the body needing time to repair. You know, you're going to do that overnight. Sleep, 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 and sleep. I can't say it enough. Kids need to sleep, and a lot of them don't. Parents, if you're listening to this, you need to get the kids to sleep. They need to stop playing video games till midnight. You know, your kids will hate me. You know, tell them it's my fault, but they need to get to sleep. There's nothing better. There's nothing more important to recovery than sleep. Nutrition, hydration, probably a very close second. Sleep is incredibly important. We talked about stress and recovery working together a number of times. And just in general, tools for recovery, we talked about them: sleep, hydration, nutrition, rolling out, all these things. We don't have time to get into the details here. We will in separate videos. But again, coaches, a lot of you know this already. It's just a matter of always remembering and stressing it with your athletes. Tapering. All right, is this an art or a science? I will tell you it's both. We often talk about science and our scientific perspective to training, but at the end of the day, tapering a team, which, by the way, for those that don't know exactly what tapering is near the end of the season, kind of going into your postseason, whether it be state, whether it be nationals, whether it be regional meets, things like that, depending on where you're competing. You want your athletes to be well rested, but stay fit. Basically, peak performance ability in terms of their fitness levels, but not be overly tired and not be able to perform well. Now, that's easier said than done. And anybody that tells you, hey, this is the perfect taper for all distance runners is either lying to you or really doesn't know their stuff. There's no such thing as one perfect taper. It varies by athlete greatly, and you need to know your athletes well to be able to determine what works for them. I am also going to say that it varies by gender, it varies by mental state, it varies by age groups, it varies by experience. In fact, it varies by so many factors that, again, one system is not going to work for you. You're going to have to figure it out. There's no way, and I won't do it. I won't tell you, hey, do it for 3 weeks and do it this way and cut this percentage on each week. I will tell you there's two general methods of doing that. One of them is a linear method, right? And you see on the graph there, it's just a straight line. You just drop by the same, 20% drop for 3 or 4 weeks as leading into the postseason. Honestly, it's the easier way to do it. It doesn't take a lot of math to be able to figure that out. But also, honestly, I don't think it's as effective. I think you need to kind of play with that a little bit, and you'll see the exponential kind of step being down. You'll see kind of a larger drop at the beginning, and then it kind of just begins to kind of steady out into the very last, important races like your nationals or state or regional or whatever it may be for the athletes. Now, keep in mind, your team's going to vary. You're going to have your varsity runners trying to make, the big championship meets. You're going to have your JV and freshman runners just hoping to do well at league finals or at the association or regional meets. So you can't taper the whole team at the same time. That's where it gets tricky, right? Rely on your assistant coaches, get this information out. make sure that runners are tapering where it makes sense for them to peak their performance. What else? I think, again, there is a rule of thumb somewhere between that exponential and that linear method where you're dropping mileage. I will tell you, from my experience, right, I could be wrong. This is simply what I've seen, and each of you are going to have to know your teams well to understand how the tapering works. It is a lot of science, as we're describing here, but there's a ton of art involved in this, right? A ton of feel and gut feeling. Over the years, I discovered that especially at the high school level, girls' teams did not benefit by long tapers. They simply got out of shape, confidence went down, and they performed poorly in the first season if we started too early. For them, we kind of kept it pretty high up, took a few steps down, and then severely dropped within 10 days of the big race. So that was very important. Boys at the high school level, at least, again, my experience that I had there is they benefited from more of a linear drop, and even double dipping, which we won't get into too much now, but kind of dipping for one big race and then pushing back the workouts up and then dipping again in terms of volume right before the next big meet, and they can handle that, and it worked really well. Weight room, for example, we were big on weight room. I saw athletes where we tapered the weight room, or we even got rid of it in the postseason, and it really negatively affected them. Most of them benefited by continuing pretty steady through weight room, almost up to the very end. You don't want to overdo it. You don't want to do anything different or increase volume or intensity in the weight room, but maintaining it was important for them. It kept them, a lot of it, I think, was mental, but it was important. So again, you're going to have to figure this out. There's a lot of art involved along with the science. Again, we mentioned that the big goal is tapering is performance peaks and removing fatigue, but not getting them out of phase. So that risk is detraining them, and it happens. And it's a horrible thing. And coaches, we got to put that squarely on our shoulders, right? If we detrain an athlete before a big meet, they don't perform, don't put that on the athlete, right? We made a mistake. Tapering is on our shoulders. We've got to live up to that. So it's a tricky thing. First year out, younger coaches or coaches just starting out, I'm going to tell you, you got a 90% shot at blowing it, right? You will learn from it. You'll get better. We all did. And then you'll be able to kind of hone that in year after year. And that's when it gets fun. I will say there's nothing better than watching your team peak at the right time and beat a team that beat them throughout the entire season. It goes 1,000 miles, and your kids will love it as well. A little bit more on tapering. Nothing that happens during this time is that, generally speaking, and again, we'll get into details in different videos in the future, but you're going to decrease your volume during that drop, right? Whether it be 5 weeks out, 3 weeks out, 2 weeks out, you drop the volume, meaning the number of miles. If you're doing 60 miles a week, you'll drop, to 50, then to 40, then to maybe even 30, who knows, right? Depending on your steps. But you will increase your intensity, right? As that volume drops, your intensity is increasing, meaning you're throwing in your pure speed, your speed endurance. You're keeping people sharp. You're making sure all the systems are in play, but with less volume of working those systems, right? So those 6 systems that we talked about, they're still in play. They're still critical to success in distance running. We don't want to detrain those systems in your athletes, but at the same time, we don't want to fatigue or tire them out. So again, decrease the volume, the amount of total mileage, the amount of intervals or repeats that you do, hill repeats, etc., but increase the intensity, make it shorter, make it sharper. Again, mental is a huge part. Make them feel like they're ready to go, but they're not exhausted, right? And if that's done right, you'll see the green line performance continue to increase. All right, and percentages, I'm not a big fan of numbers like this because I don't know how people really figure this out, but it's a lot of it's gut. But at the end of the day, they'll talk to you about 4 to 6% improvement. I think that varies greatly. Runners that are well rested throughout the season will get less impact by the taper, right? Runners that have been more fatigued and haven't lived up to their potential through most of the season, but you taper them just right, you'll see a significant jump, maybe even as high as 8, 9, 10% improvement. And those are always, everybody knows this, right? You get that number 5 runner that peaks exactly at the right time and blows everyone out of the water, and just makes a big difference for that team. So you'll always have one. It gives you a good 8, 9, 10% increase. Energy uses of muscles. This one, I love this graph. It speaks to a few things. I'm not going to get into the science. I won't lie to you, partly because I don't know if I remember all of it. Two, because it's not, the details of it are not overly important for most of the coaches here, and definitely not for a lot of the parents. But we use this a lot more in practice than we do in the scientific basis, right? We're not out there with measuring ability to measure what's going on with these systems and how they're using our athletes. I wish we could, but we don't have that technology yet. But a few things that we do, right? So at the beginning of the races, we talk a lot about our athletes about going out strong. We tell them even, you've got a good 7 seconds where you can go as hard as you want to go at the beginning of the race, but then settle into your pace, right? Or you're going to burn out, right? And that has to do with ATP. We even tell them about ATP. I think it's important for kids to know some of the science behind what's going on. And as you can see, both the yellow and that purple color, these are two systems that are running for, looks like about, according to this, about 8-9 seconds in length. These don't last very long. ATP burns up incredibly quick, but the beauty of it is that you can go what technically would be considered anaerobic, right? That kind of speed of early race, and you'll see that in cross-country races. Burst of speed at the beginning, you got hundreds of kids running out of the gate. You want to get good positioning. This is the time to use that energy. Now, if you sustain that for 15, 20, 25, 30 seconds, and you're still going that hard and you're going anaerobic, you are going to continue to build all the waste products in your systems and shut yourself down. You're going to set yourself up for being passed at the end of the race significantly. But for 8-9 seconds, 7 seconds, what we use with our kids, they kind of got free reign. And it's, again, physically, the science supports that energy is there, available, and it doesn't impact any of the other aerobic systems that are used later on for that overall performance. So the science supports it, but mentally, it gives kids the confidence to go out strong, which a lot of them are a little nervous because they're concerned about dying. But we tell them, hey, do it for 7-8 seconds, back off, go back into your normal race pace, not training pace, right? And then continue racing. And we'll get into the rest of the strategy later. The other part that we do talk a lot about is the aerobic system, right? In terms of warming up. And so if you look at the blue line, the aerobic system takes, significant time, in relative terms, right, to warm up. So it looks like it takes a good minute at least before your body really warms up and gets up to that high level of performance for your aerobic system, which is what you're going to use the majority of the time for distance running, right? Even though you use other systems as well. Again, aerobic system simply means that your ability to run while consuming enough oxygen to do that level of activity or that level of effort. But you can see when you start off the race, if you're starting off cold, you're not using the full potential aerobic energy. So there is a period of time in which we're kind of suffering. And so in order to maintain a certain level of performance, if you look at the difference between the blue and the green line, we're having to dig into our lactic acid systems, which is not a good thing. It's there for a reason. It's there to protect us. Believe it or not, it protects muscles. But it's going to hurt us. So warming up, this is what we used to tell our kids, hey, warming up is essential. You need to warm your aerobic system to a point when that race starts, you're not at 0, you're at that 1 minute mark. You're already at the top level of performance for the aerobic system, and you go from there. You're not having to dig deep into another system. That's not where you want to do that. You will dig into your lactic, you will dig into your anaerobic systems near the end of the race, but you want to have to do that right out of the gate. That's going to hurt you and cost you dearly at the end of the race. So again, I like this chart because it does a lot of explaining. From a mental perspective, coaches, kids will listen to you if you can show them something and they're like, hey, this makes sense, right? This is backed by science. This is not just what my coach is telling me because he wants to tell me this, right? Or he loves telling me what to do, or she likes telling me what to do. This is backed by science, right? So again, you can use this in different ways, but a great chart to look at in terms of the energies used during distance running. Hydration, it seems like a logical run, and many people laugh when I talk about this because everybody says, oh, I know, coach, we gotta drink lots of water. Yeah, but what does that mean, right? So first of all, how do you tell if you're dehydrated? A lot of people wait till they're thirsty. A lot of people wait till they really feel the effects of dehydration, which could be horrible, right? If anybody's ever been through that, the cyclists call it bonking. Everybody has a term for it. But it's a horrible feeling when you really reach true levels of dehydration. And by levels, if you look at this chart, 1 through 8, and this is actually urine color. So you can actually see throughout the day how you're doing in terms of your hydration. 1, 2, and 3, you're good for the most part, right? When you're getting into the 4, 5, and 6, you're now dehydrated, at a moderate level, but you need to be drinking more water. If you're getting into the 7s and 8s, you're definitely not drinking enough water. And if you're going out and trying to race like that, it's a significant impact to athletes' performance. Coaches, honestly, especially with youth athletes, if I have to say, the number one reason why kids tend not to perform well, assuming their mental state is ready, right? They're ready to go and they're wondering why they're not doing well. Check their hydration levels, and I don't mean check their urine, but have parents, discuss their hydration methods at home, how much they're drinking. Have high schoolers, carry large jugs of water to their classrooms. Figure something out. How much water? Believe it or not, we're talking 8 to 10 glasses. I mean, big glasses, water bottle size, every single day, regardless of whether it's hot or cold, regardless of whether they're racing or not or doing long runs. 8 to 10 water bottles or 8 to 10 large glasses of water every single day. I challenge you to find any athlete that does that well. The closer to it, the better. There's always one great example, and there's also other significant number of kids, especially youth, that if you talk to them one-on-one, they will admit they had 1 cup of water, they had juice today, they had a soda, right? You can only imagine the levels of dehydration they're going through. Their performance is going to suffer in practice, and it's going to suffer in races, of course. All right, and again, you always want to look for signs that are kind of easier to spot, things like muscle fatigue, if they're always talking about being sore and very fatigued, even in easier workouts, if they have dry skin and lips that are, literally look like they're chapped, right, in certain times of, where weather conditions doesn't explain it in itself. Heart rates, something easy you can do with your athletes, have them take their own heart rates, do it kind of as a fun thing. If they notice increase in their heart rates compared to other weeks, that could be a possibility, right? Overtraining is another one. We're not going to get into overtraining today, but we can at a later time. Effects of dehydration, another interesting graph to use with your athletes. Even 1% of dehydration to the body, you already begin to feel thirsty. Again, go by the rule that if you're already feeling thirsty and you start to drink, it's already too late. You are dehydrated at that point. So make sure you're constantly doing and preempting feeling thirsty. And that's hard to do for I honestly struggle with it myself. At 2%, you're already seeing impaired performance. It's affecting their running ability. And when you get into 3 and 4%, which doesn't sound like a lot, it has a major impact on things like endurance running. And we're talking literally cardiovascular type impacts, heat illnesses, other stuff, especially obviously in warmer days or days where dehydration is going to be more of a factor, but it is a factor every time, regardless of climate, regardless of the temperature. Nutritional needs. Again, we can have a whole seminar on this, but protein, fat, and carbs. This is a big one to parents, right? Coaches, we don't have a lot of control over what the kids eat, unfortunately, but we can remind them. Parents, you have a ton of control over this. Carbs are incredibly important, especially as they get higher in mileage. Now, that doesn't mean 3 giant bowls of pasta every day. It doesn't mean carbo loading, as you will read in runners' magazines for marathoners. These kids are not running marathons, at least not yet, right? When they get older, become adults, they may. But it means well-balanced meals, good healthy meals, right? 50% carbs, 20% protein, and believe it or not, 30% fat. I mean, there's healthy fats out there you need to consume. We're gonna not do a lot of nutritional breakdown here, but again, we will in future videos. Just make sure you balance out the meals well. They're healthy. You shouldn't be eating big steak, that consumes 80% of their meal and then a little salad on the side. They should be eating a lot more grains and foods that contain carbs with a small portion of chicken or fish that provides the protein, and then nuts and stuff with some of the healthy fats as well. And parents, believe me, I know this is difficult, not easy, and I'll be honest with you, not always that cheap, right? It's expensive to eat healthy, but there's alternatives. There's a ton of information on the internet you can Google to make it a little easier. But nutrition, I would say I've seen some amazing athletes over the years, and as we kind of work on all these things like the mental and the physical and the sleep and the hydration, the last component to kind of put them at a different level is nutrition. And it's a hard one, right? It's not fully under their control either, or our control as coaches. Parents, you play a huge role in that one. And if you can help us with that, it does make a difference. I can't put it in percentages for you, but it will make a difference between a kid that can kind of take it to another level. So again, a lot of information there. We'll get some more information out on that as well. Strength and flexibility. We're talking about a ton of stuff here. Again, I wish we really can spend more time. I'm looking down at my watch now and seeing the time we've had already. We will get into this. In fact, you've seen some of it already where we have our Myrtles and lunch routine out. We have a core routine that we've actually recorded the video for. We're going to release that soon as well. but will eventually have a weight routine. So just know this, strength training is incredibly important for a distance runner, not just for sprinters or other athletes. Now, does that mean that your distance runners you're going to put them into a weight room and get them bulk up and, start lifting and, maxing out on their weights? No, absolutely not, right? But does that mean, and I remember when I was an athlete back in high school, which is a long time ago now, we never do it. We were, distance runners were known for being skinny, lanky kids. We had no upper body whatsoever. That's changed, and you need strong runners. There's a such thing as power runners. I've had some amazing power runners over the years. You look at them walking down the street, you wouldn't think they're a distance runner, but they can move, and they tend to be very good on the hills, both up and down. And even your skinnier, scrawnier looking kids, put them in a weight room and you'd be surprised what they can lift. They don't look like they could, but they absolutely can. And this is going to help them both in terms of running posture. It's going to help them in terms of driving, not just their legs, but their arms, their upper body, their torso during their running motions, right? And we'll get into that later as well. So it could be as simple as using some weights. We're not talking about very, very, very heavy weights, but we are talking about more repetitions. We are talking about, a lot of running motions. Back muscles are incredibly important for running. Shoulders tend to get fatigued during running. You want to make those stronger. So there's a lot they can do in the weight room. And again, we'll put out some routines in the future on that as well. Now, the counter to that is as they spend more time in the weight room, get stronger on you, they're going to start losing some flexibility. You don't want that either. They need the flexibility. You need to make sure they're doing things like yoga. And I know some people laugh at that, right? But if you haven't done yoga, coaches, give it a try and then talk to me again. I used to be one of those, athletes when I was younger, thinking that it was kind of a silly thing. Since then, I've done it a number of times, and it is hard. It is very difficult, but it both works strength and flexibility together. So there is a balance between the two. Simple stretching, all that stuff's great. Don't get me wrong. Dynamic stretching, all this stuff that we'll get into later a little bit more. But you need to make sure that while they get stronger, they don't begin to lose flexibility. Range of motion is incredibly important. In fact, if you look at the diagram, one of the pictures here, you'll see all the different kind of angles or axes of motion. Kids, and youth athletes, and all athletes for that matter, can't lose that because that begins to impact their running form, their posture, things like that. So those are important. But cross training, man, we can talk forever about this. Big believer in it. Sure. To run faster, you need to run, right? Period. There's no way around that. But that being said, there's only so much mileage you can pile on top of a kid before you break him, right? But hey, if they want to do a little more and you got them motivated and the parents are motivated and you want to have them bike a day, hey, get them on a stationary bike, get them biking with their parents. Do it for fun, right? That's going to be a little more power, and especially in the quads, things of that nature. If they're swimmers and they love to swim and they've got access to a pool, hey, go do some laps. Right? Great cardiovascular exercise without very little stress on the muscles and especially on the joints. So there's a lot of cross training that can be done. Big believer in it. Now, it's not a substitution for the running and everything else we need to do in terms of training our athletes, but it's a great add-on, a great bonus. And it does, for example, swimming, it works your entire body, right? So it's one of those things where you kind of work muscles that they normally don't train, helps them keep them a little bit more healthy, protects them from injury. So there's a lot of benefits to cross training. Do it smart. Think about your athletes. Think about what they have experience doing, what they have access to. Not always easy. I remember there was times where we used to do, once a week we do swim workouts with the entire high school team. That was chaos. Honestly, looking back, pure chaos. But it helped us. And again, there's a big physical benefit to doing cross training, and there's a huge mental benefit to having your athletes feeling like, hey, I'm doing more. Because guess what? My competition isn't doing this. So don't ever forget that component. Proper running form. Big debate on this one. And I'll tell you, I've changed my thinking 1,000 times on this one. Does a runner have to have great running form to be a great runner? Depends on the level, right? Everybody loves to point out that one runner has horrible running form and still is amazing. I've had those athletes. I've had athletes that if you saw them running down the street, you would think that they're injured, something's wrong with them. They've got to be hurting, but they're flying. I've had athletes break 15 minutes in a 3-mile, and they had absolutely some of the worst running forms I've ever seen of any athlete, whether I trained them or not. So is it possible to run fast with poor running form? Yes. Is there a benefit to working on running form? Absolutely. How much time and how do you balance those two pieces of information? That's strictly on you, coaches. We need to emphasize it, especially with younger athletes, so they learn good habits in terms of posture, their head position, in terms of their arms, foot landing, incredibly important, right? That they don't develop bad habits, all important. Some kids will benefit from it greatly. Others won't change a bit. You'll work with them, and they will rarely change. Make sure that in the process of working on their running form, you don't kind of stigmatize them or stereotype them into this like, oh yeah, you have horrible running form and that's bad and you'll never be great because of that, because that's not true either. So work on it. It's important. Don't make it mission critical. Don't disregard other areas because you spend so much time on form. So again, my opinion on that one. I know, I'm sure people will disagree with me with that. But now, real quick, running form. First of all, what is good running form? Second of all, what can you do to fix it? First of all, head. We'll start at the top. Neutral position, meaning looking straight forward, eyes looking straight ahead. They shouldn't be positioning down or looking straight up. Athletes tend to do that when they get fatigued. They look down. Athletes tend to do that when they sprint at the end of a race and look up and kind of throw their head back and forth. The head should be in a neutral, looking forward position, and they should not be, rocking back and forth. It should be kind of steady, in a steady place. Shoulders tend to ride up as they get tired, right? Literally the shoulder gets closer and closer and closer to the ears. We need to keep those down and relaxed. Hands, don't make fists, right? In terms of strong, like tension-filled fists, right? Like you're gonna punch somebody. It should be nice and relaxed, right? Loose. I mean, honestly, the more loose, the better. Because if you relax the fist or the hand and the wrist, that relaxes the arm, that relaxes the shoulder, that relaxes torso. We're looking for fluid motion and not a very tense motion. Even when runners are kicking, believe it or not, they tend to if they get overly tense as they're trying to run faster, they actually will end up running slower if they tense up too much. So they want to stay light and relaxed. Arms, 90-degree bend at the elbow. Rotation in terms of running form should come from the shoulder. So it's bent at the elbow, but the movement is coming from the shoulder, not from the elbow. So the elbow shouldn't be extending out and back in, out and back in. It really is, the motion is forward and back at the level of the shoulder. Very important to make sure arms are not swinging across the body. Literally draw a line down the center, down the sternum of the chest. Hands should not cross that. So most athletes tend to do it, especially when they kick. They tend to really torque that torso, and the hands come flying across. Some do it even just at a slower pace for a long run. Correct that quickly. That's probably one of the easiest things to correct. One of the techniques we used to use, and we still do once in a while, is have kids run with 2 batons in their hands, and they literally will clang each other, and they start hitting each other as they start coming across the body. In terms of the fists getting too strong, have them run with and you're going to laugh at this, I remember this from my high school days, run with a potato chip in their hands, holding by the middle finger and the thumb. And again, if they start tensing up, they're going to crack and break that chip. If they stay relaxed, they're going to hold it there. Again, you try things, but the idea is to kind of reinforce this and constantly remind athletes of it. The stride and the landing of the foot itself, make sure they're landing on the midfoot. So they should not be landing at the heel striking. You've all heard of that. They should be landing midfoot and underneath the body. In fact, I don't like this image because it really looks like he's still heel striking and well ahead of his knee. It should be happening underneath the knee and underneath the body. And it's really more almost like a cycle rotation, and almost like if they were on a bike and cycling. And again, we'll get into some videos with that in the future as well. Now, all that being said, work on form in terms of drills. There's a ton of drills. We'll go over some right now real quick, but do it at certain segments of practice. Don't have your athletes focus on an entire long run about their running form. Have them do it for a mile and then forget about it and just run. And maybe at the end in the last mile, focus again on form and then relax, right? Do it periods of time. If they're overly focused on it, they're going to have a hard time relaxing, kind of just enjoying running, and that's a big part, especially when working with youth. So do it at the appropriate times, focus very well on it, get the benefit out of it, and then have them relax and see how much of it begins to stick little by little. Drills, A skips, B skips, butt kickers. There's all kinds of stuff that we've done in the past. We will have some videos coming out on this shortly, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. But again, easy to Google this stuff. Horses that you can do that are sometimes done along with the Myrtle routines. The whole idea is really teaching how to run that whole rotation of the leg and remembering that it's not just your legs, it's your upper body, it's your head, it's your eyes as well. So anyway, that being said, take a proper running form and see how it fits into your program. Racing strategy. Again, whole video on this to be done. Right now, we're going to do nice and easy, high-level stuff. Start of the race, we focus use on getting into a good position, which means you've got to blast out of that gate. You've got 7 seconds of ATP, as we talked about earlier, to get into a good position. We talk about what the right position is for them. It's going to vary. Not everyone is going to be in first place. In fact, I prefer my athletes not be in the front of the race. But our top athletes will be near the front of the race, right? I want to see them in 4th, 5th, 6th place during a cross-country race, or at least top 20. Our number 3, number 4 runners, I want to see them in the middle of the pack. Our number 5 through 7 runners, a little farther back. We tend to run from behind, no secret. Anybody that knows our style. But again, your program's going to vary in terms of your strategy, but everybody's going to have a strong start at the beginning of the race, get into the proper position, whatever that is, whatever you decide as a coach, and make sure you kind of slot in and then settle into a pace, right? Middle miles, we tell athletes over and over and over again, whether it be the middle laps in a mile race, whether it be the middle mile of a 5K or 3-mile race, middle miles or the middle portion of a race is absolutely the most important part of a race. You can have a great start and a great finish for 200 meters each and completely fall apart in the middle mile, right? It's going to cost you a lot more. We like to tell them that this is where they begin to really pick up the pace. Doesn't mean they kick, doesn't mean they sprint. It means they really begin to look at who's in front of them. And one thing we jokingly say to them is start to count. I passed 1, I passed 2, I passed 3, and they begin to pick it up gradually, slowly catching up to a runner, riding on their back for a few steps, moving around them and moving up to the next one. We tell them to count the runners as they pass them. We jokingly say, don't do it out loud for the logical reason of, you don't want to waste your breath too. We jokingly say, because you don't want to be rude, right? Just count it in your head and it serves as motivation. We really talk about the second half of the race as being our race and picking up the pace significantly and really begin to kind of charge down and really chase and hunt down the runners ahead of us. Finish, kicks. We begin picking up the pace with anywhere from 400 to 600 meters, and kicks are going to vary, right? Your age and ability of your athletes, the preparedness, the amount of speed endurance that they have worked out in or have natural ability for. I like to see my athletes kick for about 400 meters. 3 is probably more common. 2, in my opinion, is too short. They're saving way too much for the very, very tail end. And if they're only kicking the last 100 meters, I'm probably not going to be very happy with that. And you're always going to get that. And there's not, again, you're going to vary on age and experience of how much you're going to give them a hard time over it. But you do want to extend that kick longer. Endurance athletes, for the most part, exceptions occur, right? They're not your 100-meter runners, and they don't have the incredible burst of speed. And even if they did, they can't make up ground that they've lost in the whole 3 miles in the last 100 meters. But in the last 4 to 5 to 600 meters, they can make up a lot of ground, let me tell you. So get them to learn how to kick and get them to have the confidence that they can kick from a longer perspective. Holds true for sprinters, or kickers. It holds even more true for those that maybe don't have the fastest kick in the world. Get those runners, those athletes to be able to kick from 500, 600 meters out, and it'll really burn out those kickers that are trying to race against them. Passing. Approach the runners from the rear. Make sure they sense you're there. In other words, see you maybe peripherally just a little bit. Get up to their back. Use that as a way of kind of literally wrapping a rope around them and dragging yourself up to them. We talk to our athletes a lot about that. Get there. Make your presence known, and I don't mean that by saying hi, right? But it's one of those things where they can feel your presence there. And then when you pass and pass significant. In other words, don't just pass and get right in front of them. All you're doing now is you're allowing them to draft off you, both from a mental and physical perspective. Go around them, surge out in front of them, challenge them to follow you. Most won't, right? And you'll have passed them and you'll surge towards the next runner and you'll do that again. So we want to kind of slowly creep up to a runner. We want to settle in for a few steps, and then we want to pass with a charge and a surge to make sure that they either don't follow, and if they do, they're going to have to put in a significant effort to do so. You don't want to pass someone and end up helping them in doing so, especially if it's a competition. Now, if it's a teammate, totally different story. And I won't get too much into that, but coaches, know that well too as well. Surge to reach a teammate, and as you pass and bring them with you, that's going to be a different. You're not going to surge away from them. You're going to gradually move up to them, go side by side for a number of steps, and then motion that, hey, we're going to go together. And there's a whole other benefit to that. But we're talking mostly about competition. The landscape itself plays a big part in this as well. Turns, running the tangents, to some degree, enough said about that, right? But teach your runners how to run tangents. Don't assume that they know geometry well. No offense to our youth, but sometimes it takes some time to really explain that literally on a whiteboard in terms of the amount of distance. Use a string, show them the significant distance that they're increasing their race by not running the tangents well, and literally what that means. I think a lot of times we make assumptions that the youth and our kids, even older high school kids, understand that. Make sure they understand what that means and that they do it well. And that they can see how much distance that really changes. We love to use the track for that and tell them, hey, if you run in lane 2, you're running 8 extra meters than if you run in lane 1. And then we show them what that looks like. And then we say, what if you run way out here? And now imagine a 3-mile race with a ton of curves and what that could possibly add up to. So there's that. Hills as well, right? Strategy. A big one that we boast with our youth all the time is that we start off, uphill running, for example. You start an uphill strong, right? We always tend to do kind of a surge at the beginning of it. We settle into a strong run uphill. But the most important part is when you reach the apex of the top of the hill, there's a tendency just mentally that's not just youth, this is human beings, right? We tend to be like, oh, I finally made it, I'm almost there. And we tend to shut down, especially when we get to the top. We're like, I made it. And you kind of shut down and you actually end up running slower than you were when you were running uphill when it was actually harder. This is a perfect opportunity to surge our runners, pushing through that last 10 to 20 meters of a hill, regardless of how long the hill was itself. We actually want them to put in a stronger level of effort there than they did through the rest of the hill, regardless of the length of the hill. Surge not only to the top, but through the apex, out to the flat, and if there's a downhill coming up through that as well, for at least another 10 seconds after that. The combination of doing that surge in combination with others relaxing and backing off, you'll see your runners pass a significant number of runners that way that won't be able to respond because they're so exhausted from the hill, and they really kind of put themselves in a different grouping of runners just on every hill. Now, downhill running, whole other thing. Mentally, your athletes have to respect the downhills because, yes, they can be treacherous. I've seen people take some bad falls on downhills, but more importantly than that, they need to learn how to not fear the downhill, to feel very comfortable. And that's only going to happen by practice, repetition. Run downhills, run downhills, run downhills. We do uphill repeats all the time. We tend not to do downhills, include downhill repetitions, downhills with hills, downhills on dirt, on bumpy trails. Get them very comfortable running downhills, getting to relax and really have that confidence that they can run those well. But again, locally, Mount Sac, you guys all know that course has more downhill running than it has uphill running, even though we all look at those hills and go, oh my God, it's horrible hills. There's actually more mileage on downhill running during that course than there is uphill. The winners of that races know how to run downhills, plain and simple. So very important, make sure your athletes know how to do that. Make sure they get to the bottom of a downhill and continue that momentum into the flats, or even in the uphill if there's an uphill coming after that. So team strategy, bro, we could talk forever about this, but coaches, I know you know this, parents, you may not, but cross country and even distance track is not an individual sport, no matter what anybody tells you. It is a team sport, and there's team strategy involved in winning races beyond just the scoring aspect of it. Out there, we already talked about how you can kind of surge into another runner that's on your team and have run side by side, push them to kind of increase their pace and surge with you. There's many things you can do. You can draft, off each other. You can even have a lot of hand motions in terms of kind of communicating with each other out there, encouraging each other. There's a ton of stuff that can be done. Again, we're not going to get into the details of a lot of that, but I will tell you, invest some time in talking as a team of how you're going to run that race. Make sure every athlete knows how the other athletes are prepared to run that course, so there's no surprises. If somebody's planning on surging on an uphill, and they're going to start really pushing that pace at that point, make sure everybody else is aware of it. So the other athletes don't feel like, oh my God, I'm dying, I'm being dropped. No, I'm being dropped because of what's happening, and either I incorporate that into my plan and do the same, or I don't because my plan is different, but I know that that's why that's happening, and that's okay, and it's not going to freak out that athlete. So team strategy is very important. You need to have conversations. You need to have a lot of meetings and do a lot of talking. No way of getting around that. There's a lot of talking involved in terms of training our distance runners. Right, mental strength, last but not least. Well, again, another big topic. Coach with purpose. Coaches, um, and believe me, I know I can't imagine any of you, unless you're making 100 grand or more a year, which no one is that I've ever met besides some top collegiate athletes. Going out there, we coach for different reasons, right? Some of us love to work with youth. Some of us have that competitive edge still in us, and we want to compete one way or the other, even if we're not able to compete on our own rights anymore. You do it because you want to help the community. You do it because you want to give kids an opportunity. There's 1,000 reasons why you coach, right? Make sure you're clear on your purposes as to why you coach, and make sure that reason and that logic is clear to your athletes and your parents and your program. And that's something that it helps not only to remind them of that, but remind yourself of that. It'll make you a better coach in general. And in doing so, you create something called team vision, right? And by team vision, I don't mean that you as a coach create the vision as like, hey, this is what I call, we want to go to nationals, we want to go to state, we want to do all these things. And then, and your team is kind of like, okay, that sounds cool. Right? No. Creating a team vision is really having a vision created by the team, right? Again, meetings and talks and conversations and time. It takes time to be a coach, and it's not just about workouts and races. Get into a room, get on a whiteboard, discuss what the goals of the team are. Make sure that that vision and what you want to accomplish isn't what you as a coach want to accomplish. It's what your athletes want to accomplish. You're there to serve them. Let's always remember that. They're not there to serve you and put you on a pedestal somewhere for winning something. You're there to serve these athletes, and you need to know, one, what do they want? If they're okay with just being okay, not that that's great, right? And you want to be able to try to change that, but at the end of the day, there's nothing you can do about that. You can scream and yell and holler all you want, but you need to make sure that they are bought into what that success is going to be. Once they are, they will not only ask of you, they will demand of you more, right? And you want that as a coach. You want to get to that point. Believe me, it's harder when you feel like you're trying to demand and ask of them. You want them coming to you and say, Coach, we can do more. Coach, we want to win next year. Coach, we want to do this. That's what we want in the end. So you really want to develop that atmosphere, build that vision from the ground up, including all your athletes on the team, to come up with what that vision is going to be, not just the coaching staff. Athletes buy-in, like we mentioned already, you got to get it. You don't have the buy-in, doesn't matter what your dreams are, doesn't matter what great workouts you have, what great program you run, you're not gonna get there. Athletes have to buy in, and it's your job to figure out how to do that. Look for your leadership on your team, look for key personnel on your team, look for your assistant coaches to help, your parents, the whole community really that's behind you, but to get that buy-in, and it'll go very far. Leadership on the team, as we mentioned, is critical. Find the right leaders in the team, coaches. Just because a runner's faster doesn't make them a great leader. I've seen incredibly fast runners, and sorry for the expression if somebody finds offense to this, but they were horrible leaders. We had leaders that were great leaders and were not the fastest kids on the team. You have to find what works best for your program, but find someone that's going to truly lead this team. That's going to, one, work well with you and your coaching staff. Right, you have to be youth that's able to work with you well, be understanding of the coaching experience. We want to challenge both the coaching staff and the team to do more, but also someone that has the rapport and the respect of their peers. Right. You'll find both. There's some kids that are great and super enthusiastic, but for whatever reason, they don't have that respect from the rest of the team. The reverse, you have kids that are super great athletes, and everybody listens to them and everybody admires them, but they won't work well with you. That doesn't work either, right? So you've got to find the right combination, boost that type of personality in terms of what you admire as a coach in your athletes. Make sure that kids, especially the younger kids, the freshmen in high school, the 7-8-year-olds in a youth program are, looking at them and saying, hey, I want to be like that, right? Not just in terms of how fast, but in terms of their psychology, their personality, and what they strive for. We can go into a lot of that, but all the things, right? Just encouraging to others, motivational, always on time, always the first one to show up, the last one to leave, all the things that make great athletes, and just great, people in general. Never stop mentality. Never stop mentality. Again, I've been criticized for this one, and that's okay. And coaches, find what works for you. These last two things are probably a little bit more opinionated than they are facts or science in any way, but I'll show them anyway. We've always tend to have this like never stop mentality, like nothing will stop us. If it's 100 degrees, we're going to run. If it's raining hail, we're going to run. If it's snowing, we're going to run. If there's an earthquake, we're going to run. You know, and I hate to say it, but if there's COVID, we're going to run. Nothing has ever had us cancel a practice because of a condition, and we will never cancel a practice. We've yet to cancel one since I've been coaching. We don't. And again, we parents listening to this, you've heard this from me 1,000 times. You are the one that makes the decision for your youth. We are not, right? If you choose not to send your child to practice, we'll respect that, right? But we'll be there. And if one child shows up, then we will run with that one person, right? That one youth. If everyone shows up, we'll run with everybody, right? But we will always be there. We won't cancel. Unfortunately, in my opinion, I hear way too many cancellations of way too many programs. And those days and weeks and hours of missing practice quickly adds up and becomes an issue. So again, physically speaking, and I know this is where coaches and parents will argue with me, coach, does it really make a difference if they miss one practice? Does it really make a difference if you cancel that practice? Physically, probably not, right? Like, is it really going to matter that they missed one practice where it was really, really, really hot, or there was, you know, bad air quality? Probably not. Maybe you can even argue that maybe it's better in the long run. But I'll tell you, mentally, psychologically, a team that can stand up and say, we never stopped, it's a multiplier effect. And when things get difficult and things, you know, really get tough in that postseason, when it looks like we're just not going to make it to the next level, these teams are just faster than us, and kids can dig into that. And maybe they can't say they're the fastest team in the state, or they can't say they're the fastest team in the country, but they can say, we are absolutely the toughest team out there. We've never stopped, ever. We just don't quit. Dig into that when it really matters. And that's when you see teams that are not faster, but stronger. They'll break down over stress and perform well in the postseason. So again, opinionated, super opinionated. I get it. Use that if it works. Don't use it if it doesn't, right? Answer is always yes. This is another one of those strongly opinionated things. When I ask a kid, which I do a lot before races, before workouts, all the time, are you ready? Or any question like that, really, in terms of them, like, you know, seeing kind of where they're at. I won't lie, often I get no, or kind of, or I don't know. We always tell them the answer is yes. We tell them to lie to them. We tell them to lie to us. Now, we don't want them lying in any other occasion. But if they're about to run a race, and I ask them how they're feeling, and they answer not so good, or I was sick last night, or I didn't get enough sleep, or I had to do this, or I'm feeling a little sad because my girlfriend, boyfriend, or someone else, you know, broke up with me. We know the effects of that, and we describe those that are athletes a lot. If you go in thinking I'm going to do horrible, guess what, athletes? You're going to do horrible. If you go into a race thinking I'm going to do great, now that doesn't guarantee you're going to do great, but it gives you a shot at doing great, right? So it's very important, you know, and we'll tell them, there's no benefit in saying I'm going to do horrible. None whatsoever. Nothing good that's going to come of that. But if you say I'm going to do great, there's a slight benefit. 5%, 10%, 50%, I don't know. No one knows. But you've got a shot at doing great. But the moment you say you won't, you got zero shot at doing great in that race. So the answer is always yes, I'm ready. The answer is always absolutely, however you want to word that. But get your athletes to a mental point where even if they lie to themselves, even if they're not feeling all that great, that they can vocally say, yes, I'm ready to go, right? And mean it. It again, changes things. It changes a bad day to a great day. It changes a okay day to a good day. It does something for athletes, and it helps them get ready for racing. All right, coaches. So that is the end of this program. I do want to remind you that we'll have other videos in the future. Coaches on my staff that are listening to this, you know, we're going to continue some other training related to this. Others that are watching this, parents and so on, will have more videos related to this in the future. For now, thank you for listening. If you have any questions, feel free to comment, reach out to us. If you have topics that you want us to cover that we didn't cover, we'd love to do that in the future. If you just want to have a conversation and then disagree on something, always open to that. It's always fun and interesting to work with other coaches and athletes and parents and so on. So again, thank you very much for your time. We will see you at the next video, and have a good day.